About the ombudsman's problem. Never had the ombudsman's problems. Have you not heard about it? The family won't cooperate with me, unfortunately. They have a complaint against the ombudsman.
You need somebody who's used to the pits, who's used to the trenches, eh?
Somebody like you, I mean.
Yeah, you need somebody who's got a practical understanding of how to deal with people's problems.
Someone who's been around, someone who can tell a paranoid from a legitimate case.
Yeah.
You don't have to be Irish to enjoy the beauty of Ireland.
Or the great taste of Hollywood bread.
That's no blarney.
Webster is next on BCTV.
Good morning. Vancouver has a new mayor, Mike Harcourt. Now, what did it? He was the only guy who confidently predicted his own victory. Volrich talked about his 20,000 lead, and you know what happened to it. Was it the Saturday vote? Was it the fact that the water torture dripping about the ward system finally disabused people, enough of them anyway, to have confidence in Jack Volrich? Was it the big projects being thrust upon the city of Vancouver, certainly against Harcourt's wishes, by an all-power provincial government and its crown corporations? Was it the fact, and we're talking about this balance of votes which changed today, that Mike Harcourt, round a long time, has made it bluntly evident that he doesn't want Transpo 86, at least where the city has planned it. But it was a devastating election, once again, for the NPA. First of all, though, let me give you a couple of juicy little bits of gossip. We have two husband and wife teams now in civic politics. There is Davinsky, NPA, and his wife, Kim Campbell, who's on the school board. We have the Erickson duo. Bruce, of course, finally made it high up in the aldermanic rolls, and his wife, Libby, is on one of the other boards, the Parks Board. And then, of course, we have an inimitable father and son team. Harry Rankin, alderman, he'll run for mayor 2 years down the road now that he's got his boys on council with him, and his son Philip, who is on the school board. We have one official member of the Communist Party, Bruce York, now an alderman. We have a group which will be described by right-wingers, far be it from me to put the label on them, as civic Marxists. And the most interesting body to watch here on in is going to be the school board, dominated totally and absolutely by Cope. But first of all, down to business, I want to give you a little bit, I'm not keen on tables and numbers, but a little bit of rundown on what actually happened. Let's look at the council first. 11 seats. NPA are down 2. Cope are up 2. Team is up 1. Independent, I was going to put NDP, but I thought that wouldn't be fair. That's Harcourt, is, well, it's 1. It's down 1. There were 2 the last time round. Then we go to the school board, 9 seats. Cope, 5. NPA, down 4. Independent, up 1, and Team, down 2. Then we look at the park board. The NPA held on to their 5 unimportant seats in the park board, no change. Cope took 2, and Team 2, they're technically down 2, I suppose. But first of all, Your Worship,
Thank you very much,
congratulations
Jack. Thank you.
on a fight well done.
Thank you.
You're in now for 2 years. You
Right.
can't possibly be defeated unless Rankin goes against you 2 years from now.
That's too far ahead to look, Jack. All I'm looking for is the sun coming up over Christmas, get a golf game in with you in Hawaii.
How old are you?
37.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
One sharp segment with Harcourt. Oh no, I have other guests this morning. we've got the Minister of Education, Brian Smith. And he's here to do a little treatise on us, and we're going to call it later on, but I don't want you to miss the crack. Brian meets Dick, Jane, and Cope. And also later in the program this morning, from publisher to paperboy, J. Stuart Keate, an august man of eminent presence who has written, believe it or not, a book. But first, the smiling, happy, trim, jocular Harcourt after the break. I was on the same golf course as Mike Harcourt, the new mayor of Vancouver, one day, and he shot 78 blows. And somebody said, jocularly, of course, because who can be anything but pleasant to you this morning, that it's like having Eisenhower in the White House with Harcourt mayor of City Hall. How often do you play golf?
A couple of differences. I've got a little bit more hair than Ike had in different politics.
But you don't play golf all that much.
Oh, I play as much as I can. I go with my dad in the summertime once a week.
From here on in, though, there'll be no golf for his worship because you have too many pressing items of business to go through on.
That's right, Jack.
Now, the vote. Have you analyzed the vote yet?
Haven't had a chance. I haven't got the details yet. I'm hoping to get those from City Hall today.
I can tell you.
Okay.
Why you won the election.
Okay.
Apart from your organization.
Right.
The big NDP party machine.
Well, that's partially true. I had a lot of New Democrats, but it was amazing, Jack, the number of people that I've been working with for 12 years that came out and worked in their community groups. For example, in the West End, all of the community groups there got together and unanimously agreed to endorse me, handed out 25,000 poll cards in the West End alone.
Let me give you the figures.
A lot of that happened.
West End, northeast side. The vote up 31.7%.
That's good.
The east side up 17.6%. The mixed eastern part of the mixed east and west side up 15%, and the true west side of Vancouver up only 3.2%. Does that mean that NPA stayed home?
No, I think they had the usual turnout on the west side of about 70%. It means, though, that people in other areas of the city are starting to get involved. I think in anticipation of the ward system, where each neighborhood will have its own representative, its own elections, and I think you'll see it jump another 10% when ward elections happen.
Was it not a factor that one of the other factors which saw you in was the Saturday vote?
That made it easier for working people to get out and vote because, Jack, most families now have to have two incomes to survive, eh? And if you've got in the morning, you're getting kids off to school, both going to work, you come home, you make dinner. By 7 o'clock, you're tired.
Specifics. Will you have the ward system implemented with the provincial government charter change before the next election?
Yes, that's a pledge that I made in the election, and I intend to keep to it.
Do you require cooperation, or can you do that?
Well, we need to have cooperation of the provincial government to amend the charter. But I put forward a motion I think is very reasonable last year that was turned down by the NPA. That is that we have ward elections for 3 elections, and then we go out and have a plebiscite and let people choose then whether they want wards or at large.
In fact, of course, when you said yes to my question about the ward system, you can't guarantee anything, can you?
Well, I can't guarantee anything except I was elected on a mandate to carry it out. I made it very clear.
Do you have a voting control of council?
No, I don't. I think what's going to happen is that there are at least 6 members of council that favor it, and hopefully some others will say, well, let's give it a try. The people have spoken, let's give it a try, and hopefully we'll have a good majority of council that will vote for the charter change.
Transpo, in other words, you're going to have to get it through council with a majority vote before you can even go to Victoria to change the charter. Is that right?
That's right. I could go to Victoria and ask them to do it, but that wouldn't be the usual procedure.
Are you looking for support all the way from the 2 team members with whom you were once kind of political colleagues, May Brown and Marguerite Ford?
Well, their organization came out in favor of a full ward system, so I'm assuming that they're going to follow through on that pledge.
Does this mean that Brown and Ford will get important committee chairmanships as against, for instance, Bruce York or George Pugh?
Well, I haven't spoken to them all, Jack, but what I'm going to do is sit down with the aldermen, see where their areas of interest are, and try and accommodate them as much as possible. I'm going to work with them all. I mean, I think this separating council out and having cliques was very destructive in this last council, so I'm going to try and do away with that pettiness.
And you'll announce your committee heads in January?
Right. No, December the 8th.
December the 8th?
Right, if not before.
You're going to have to get on with the provincial government. Is that not a fact of life?
Sure.
Well, would you now change your intransigent attitude towards Transpo?
No, I made it very clear, Jack, that I'll cooperate with the federal provincial government where I see them taking actions that are going to enhance Vancouver. When I see them taking actions that are going to do harm to the city, I'll speak up. That was the pledge I made to the voters, and I intend to stick to that. I said during the campaign, yes to transit and housing, no to transpo. In the north side of Falls Creek, that's a terrible misuse of very valuable inner-city land that we've already zoned, Jack, in 1975 for a residential community, for a people place, and for a stadium.
No time for an inquest this morning, Mike, but Marathon backed out because of the way it was handled in that initial deal by the city council.
No,
remember, they walked away in a snit.
You know why they walked away? Because the market fell out from under them in 1976.
That was the real reason.
That was the basic reason, right?
But you can't stop transpo unless your council wants to support you in stopping it. In fact, maybe you can't stop it anyway.
That's true. But as I said, I laid it out very clearly to the voters what my priorities, our priorities were for our city, and transpo on the north side of Falls Creek wasn't one of them.
Volrich, the former mayor, well, he's still the mayor till the end of the year.
Right, well, to December 8th.
Is he not a big shot in the transit authority?
He's the chairman of the UTA.
Will you replace him as a matter of automatic action?
No.
Will he stay there?
No, you've got to be an elected member
So he'll come off
council.
that.
He'll come off that.
And you're committed to light rapid transit
Right,
through Barnaby
right,
to New Westminster on
Right.
the old line.
right. On
And
the old
yours-
interurban line we used to have through Central Park and the Van Ness Cut, down Commercial.
You're going to have a busy year.
Well, it's a real challenge, but that's very important to get that LRT built, and 400 new buses. Our trolley buses, as you know, are 35 years old. The old Brill buses, they're falling apart. We've got to replace them. We've got to add to the bus.
They're already ordered, are they not?
Well, I'm not sure. That's what I want to find out, because the sooner we get them, the better.
PBC,
Right.
25 million, 50 million, now they're talking about an extra 7 or 8 million.
Oh, they're talking about
Are
an
you
extra
going
20
to-
million.
Are you going to renegotiate the whole deal?
I want to go back to the original concept, Jack. Yes, because I want to go back to the original concept, which is a low-scale cruise ship facility with a trade and conference center on top of that, and a lovely 2 or 3 block park for the people of Vancouver on the roof. Move the hotel office building back over the tracks on the Marathon land as we originally proposed. Keep the $43 million that the public has into it already. We've got the site ready and cleared. Now it's up to the provincial government and the private benefiters, the hotels, the restaurants, the downtown tourist industry that's going to benefit from this, to cover the balance. We've done everything we can. The taxpayers have gone as far as they can. There is no more money in the civic coffers for sure, and I know the federal government. Now it's up to the provincial government and tourist industry.
You say therefore they scale down Pier BC to
Right.
something sane and sensible, and you will not cooperate?
I've said all along, build the Trade and Conference Center, link it to the downtown stadium on the north side of Falls Creek with a good LRT system as a way of investing in the future of our economy in the 80s and 90s. And I stick to that. I said that in '78, and I still stick to that. But why diminish an opportunity? Why diminish that setting?
There'll be no more new CPR marathon blocks behind this massive Pier BC if you have your way.
Well, they can go ahead, but they're going to have to be less than Jack Volrich was, and this council were prepared to go ahead with, a 500-foot high building when the height limit is 230 feet. Stick to the rules.
The stadium will go ahead.
Sure, and the sooner the better. As you know, Empire Stadium, Jack, is falling apart. The concrete's coming away from the steel reinforcing rods. It's going to collapse in 2 or 3 years. We have to have a new facility.
Can you work with this COPE group on council? Far be it from me to say civic Marxist, but they've taken over the school board, right, all the way, and you have Erickson and Bruce York and Harry. Will they work with you? I mean, after all, you are a
Well, it's
very
not a
much
question.
middle-of-the-road democratic socialist.
It's a question of working for the people of Vancouver, not working for me. And what I expect is cooperation on the Back to the Basics campaign that we talked about, of transit, housing, wards, finding tax relief on our educational taxes that we pay, police costs, health costs we pay we shouldn't pay. Back to the basics. And if they're not prepared to cooperate, the council members, on those issues, then I think that's sad, because they're very important issues. People have to have houses to live in.
Poster bylaw down the tube
Well, the poster bylaw has been in effect since 1912, Jack.
with punishment.
You
That's
know.
penalty
Well, what we
sections of
have to
nonsense.
do, listen, there's 2 types of people that are putting posters up: rock groups and private entrepreneurs who are using the public property for their own profit. And then there's about 15% that are non-profit
You're not going to
cultural
send
groups.
somebody to jail for
No, of
6
course
months.
not. What I'm going to do is to try and get a public kiosk system, information system, so people can post up notices
One
to
last
the public.
question. Will you hold the line on taxis, or are you going to be a spendthrift, as some
Well,
people
I'm certainly
fear?
not going to be a spendthrift, because we're going to slash about $1 billion of the proposed $1.6 billion to $1.8 billion that was proposed by the previous council. We're going to slash that back just to the basics of about $460 million on the Trade and Conference Center, on the stadium, and on the LRT. And then we're going to, as we have traditionally done in Vancouver City Hall, hold the line as much as possible. We've got inflation, we've got labor negotiations coming up. It's going to be a tough 2 years, Jack. Very tough 2 years.
Congratulations,
Thank you very much.
Mayor-elect, to be
Thank you, Jack.
clinically correct, Mike Harcourt. Next, what's next? Oh yes, can Brian Smith cope with Dick, Jane and Cope? After the break. I heard a radio commercial the other day from Brian Smith, Minister of Education, in which he kind of naively announced, he said he wants to learn from parents about the system. Is my interpretation right or wrong? It sounded very much like, here am I, the new boy, I know nothing, please tell me.
No, here am I, the new boy. I'm beginning to learn a little bit. Tell me some more.
How have you found the state of our educational system?
Not bad. Room for a lot of improvement, but good, positive responses at some 25 public meetings that I've held in every part of the province. I've been to about 45, 50 communities. I've had briefs from teachers, parents, community groups. I've heard from students.
Tell me what they tell you. What do the parents tell you? That they're
Parents tell me that they would like to see more discipline in the schools. They'd like to see the teachers and principals have more authority. They would like to see more career programs, vocational programs, not just academic programs, and they would like more involvement themselves in the operation of the schools. I mean, that's oversimplifying it, but basically that's what they tell me.
It's a strange situation. One of the new members of the school board in Vancouver, Tom Alsbury, I see, is quoted this morning, and he's an old school teacher, that he wants to bring programs for senior citizens into the schools. How many of these frills can we now afford if it means more facilities, more teachers, or more maintenance men?
Well, you see, one of the problems with the schools is the unused plant in the evenings. Many of the classrooms aren't used. There are a lot more used now than were 5 years ago. But there's absolutely no reason, if there are seniors who want to go to school in the evening, and many of them in Vancouver, that we can't find classrooms and put them in there, because that plant still costs money when it's not being used, and it makes a lot of sense to use it for seniors.
Old reactionaries like myself occasionally look at your night school program ads, in which the school board spend and the universities are competing like mad with weird and esoteric night school courses. Yeah. We wonder if this has got out of control and if we can really afford all this 24-hour use with teachers and plant and facilities and lighting and heating. Has it gone crazy?
No, but coordinating it's a problem. Not just with those two elements you mentioned, but we've got a number of community colleges in the Lower Mainland who are also running programs that overlap. And one way of dealing with that is to have a downtown center in Vancouver in which the universities and the colleges run their programs in a coordinated way out of one place.
I suppose I'm not unusual when I see these announcements on Cablevision to join a class to learn how to take a trip to Polynesia. With this being discussed in public college facilities, Capilano College I'm thinking of, I think, what in the name of God's going on?
Yeah, but there are a lot of very good ones. I mean, the tour to Polynesia, which I wish I'd taken, incidentally, would be quite unusual, Jack.
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to hear from people this morning about what they think, and I'd like to restrict this, if I could, to people with children in the school system. Not what happened in Alberta 65 years ago, or in British Columbia 50 years ago, but people with children in the system or recently out of the system, youngsters and parents alike. Because Brian Smith wants to know, and I'm sure you'll come up with positive remarks as well as negative remarks. Before I go, however, you did notice the extremely significant political change of direction in the Vancouver School Board.
I hadn't noticed that.
You hadn't noticed that?
No.
Wes Knapp of the Teachers Federation, Gary Onstad, a prominent researcher and official under the NDP administration in one of the early educational committees in
Old
Victoria.
classmate of mine.
Gary Onstad, Philip Rankin, Harry's son, Pauline Weinstein, very bright woman, Cope, very left of center organization now has control of Vancouver School Board. Can you work with people like that, you being a right-wing social creditor?
I'm not a right-wing anything. Yes, I can. I'm going to simply smother them with love and understanding and hard work.
Give them anything but money.
That's right.
Your opinions are based on factual knowledge of the current system, please. We're going to open the phones right now this morning. If you have anything to tell Brian Smith that you want improved or you want to praise the system, we won't talk about the indexing of teachers' pensions this morning, will we?
Why not?
Well, why not? They're getting 8%. They should be happy, shouldn't they?
Well, they're unhappy because theirs is capped and the others aren't. That's why they're unhappy.
Are you going to help them to change it so that theirs is the same as the BCGEU pension?
I'm going to make a statement at the end of my tour as to what I'm going to recommend to Cabinet based on the tour and what I hear from the public and from the teachers.
Webster, and your calls to Brian Smith, Minister of Education, immediately after this break. Hello there. Hold on, please. Sound good. Hold on, please.
So, 2 phone segments?
At least.
At least 2 8. I'm going to leave you, Jack, 8 minutes for the last segment for the church and maybe 4 minutes for food. Is that enough?
Is the monorail done? Brian Smith is Minister of Education of Victoria, and he wants to know what you think. Good idea. Go ahead from Clinton to Brian Smith.
Yes, good morning. I believe that over the years we have lost track of making sure that the brighter children don't get bored in school by the time they get in grade 9 and 10 and up. And would like to know if you have any ideas how to accomplish this, not to let them get bored and to...
Okay, good question.
We have a gifted student coordinator in British Columbia now who is working on that immediately. A lot of school districts have special programs for gifted children. We realize that we have neglected the gifted child in the years gone by, and we'll be doing more for that.
Thank you. Go ahead from Victoria. You're going to be late for work, I understand.
I don't want to be.
Okay, speak up now. You're on.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just couldn't hear Mr. Smith. I'm a little bit objectionable of having French forced upon my children in school, and I'm wondering if this situation can be corrected, where it's by parents or children's option.
It's not forced on them except in grade 8. It's a required course in grade 8. Even in grade 8, if a parent and a child don't wish French, often the school board can find another language that you can take by correspondence. But if you do not take French in school, if you elect not to take French or only take it in grade 8, then the student comes out at a disadvantage because it is a country with a bilingual policy nationally. A lot of the jobs that students are going to wish to have in the future with national companies, with the armed forces, with the federal civil service, with universities, going to require you to learn French, and you're at a disadvantage if you don't. So I say to students, we're not going to force you to take French. I think that's the wrong way to go, but you'd be advisable to learn French.
Well, surely. Do you get enough money from the federal government to do your French programs, to help you with them?
No, I don't get enough money, and they've cut back on the funding that they've given us this year, and they must not do that. If they wish us to be a country with a bilingual policy, they have to continue to fund it.
But isn't it kind of pathetic that you've got to say to people, take another language, French or another language? We can still get into our universities, can we not, now, without speaking any language but English in BC?
You can't get into UBC without French.
Now.
Now, they've changed that.
As of last year.
That's right.
Wasn't that shamefully slow?
Well, the other universities may well follow suit too, Jack, so I'm saying that the world of British Columbia is going to be a world of a second language. Whether it's French or whether it's Japanese or whether it's Spanish, children are advised to learn a second language.
At the moment, they must take French from grade 8.
That's all.
And so they should, though, shouldn't they?
Yes, I believe so.
Is not your biggest single problem in the Vancouver area the fact that 40% of the students have English as a second language, and that there are many English-speaking parents who are very angry that the tuition of their children is suffering because of the inability of so many in the class to communicate in English properly.
Well, that's so, but a lot of wonderful programs are going on now in Vancouver schools for children who have English as a second language.
But it is a problem. It's the
Sure,
point
it's a
I'm
problem.
making.
No question about
And
it.
the parents of the ones who speak English are upset, are they not?
Yes?
Would you consider putting all the non-English speaking children into separate classes?
No, I would not, because I think that'd be a retrograde step. They're in special classes now, special ESL classes, but the objective is to get them in the same classes.
All the way through?
That's right.
How much of a problem are you having with handicapped children being streamed into the school system?
I'm having great problems with it. It's misunderstood. It's happened very recently, causes a lot of problems, but it's the right policy, and we have to do more. The objective, incidentally, is not to stream them all the same direction at the same time. The objective is to integrate them as they're able to.
Well, with your government surpluses, you're able to get all the money you want for these kind of special aids for special pupils.
You better come with me before Treasury Board, Jack. It would be a help.
The answer is a question mark.
Question mark.
Go ahead, please.
Morning. My question is on postgraduate education. I have a son who graduated in June, went to one of these community colleges. What sort of controls do the Ministry of Education have over community colleges? Because my son comes home and teachers don't bother to turn up. The ones that do turn up are apparently garbage, not just from what my son says, but from what all his friends are saying, and they all seem to be leaving Langara College because they're dissatisfied with what they're getting there. They say the teachers come in, they're opinionated in various ways, they're discussing homosexuality and God knows what, and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. What controls do the minister have over such poor education?
Well, I don't have quite the controls you'd probably like me to have. A board manages Vancouver Community College, and Langara is part of that college system, and the board is appointed partly by me and partly by the Vancouver School Board. And if you have these problems, you should take them up, I think, with the governing board. I can't go around and tell each college which teachers they should get rid of, what things should be discussed in the classroom. I'm concerned with what you tell me, but the real jurisdiction for running that college is with the board. I don't run and manage every community college.
What you need, therefore, is a brief from some of these discontented students directly to you, if such a situation exists in Langara.
Absolutely, and I'll do something about it.
Do you hear that?
I'll take it up with the board.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very good thing for the kids.
But you see, you're giving the minister and myself hearsay and whiting up a
No,
little...
not really. This is a bunch of very decent kids.
All right, well, get them together, prepare a brief, send me a copy of the brief, send a copy to the minister, we might have something to go on.
Right, done.
Right. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Smith, I'm a teacher in Surrey on leave of absence, and I would just like to thank you for taking over the Ministry of Education and making teaching a positive thing instead of negative.
Thank you very much.
Can you be more specific, please? Because otherwise you sound like a relative.
No. Well, I know from being in the school system that a lot of teachers before were feeling very put down by many things that were happening in the way of remarks made by Pat McGeer. It made us feel like we didn't really want to give our utmost to the job because everything was negative coming out. And now we're finally getting some positive feedback and making us...
Thank you, ma'am. That's enough. You're still not more specific, but you obviously like the minister.
But I love her. I love her
You
anyway.
love her. Students fight 85% fee hike at Cap College because of the meanness of your government, apparently. Is that right? 85% fee hike? Mind you, it doesn't say what the fees are. Maybe 85% of nothing.
I think this is the first hike in fees at Capilano College since 1968. And the budget of that college was increased by the government this year considerably, but the budgets are allocated by 3 provincial councils.
I understand that.
And the overall increase in that college may not have been enough to do some of the programs they wanted to, and they elected to increase fees, and that's a decision of their board.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack.
Yes.
I've got 3 questions for you.
First, what's the first one?
first one is...
Hold on a second. I'll take the first call after the break. I'm running behind time. I was too long with Harcourt this morning. Hold on, please. That's back to 7. Webster and Brian Education, the Smith Minister. Brian Smith, the Education Minister, after the break. Brian Smith, Education Minister. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I'd like to ask your guest there. My question is threefold. And the first thing I'd like to ask your minister there is what does he intend to do about the cost sharing for education for the Vancouver School Board, which the provincial government right now pays less than 10%. And he sits there and he wants to be like a miracle worker and he's going to do this and do that. There's not, especially in our day and time nowadays, you can't do very much without money.
Okay, good question. What's your second one?
Second one is, what does this minister intend to do about our ESL problem on the east side of Vancouver, where we have 60 and 70% ESL and no help from the provincial government?
Third question.
Third question, what does the minister intend to do about midstreaming, which they've canceled places like Jericho and other...
Okay, we've touched on those. We'll try again. Hold on. First one. What do you intend to do about the cost sharing between the province and the city of Vancouver? And you're allegedly only paying 10% of the cost.
Well, it's less than that, but less than that in terms of the direct basic grant. But we have a lot of other money into education in Vancouver. It's put in by the homeowner's grant. It's put in by the total funding of community colleges, which we removed from property tax. The total funding, or the 90% of the funding of the universities. If you look at the overall support that we give as a provincial government to education around the province, it's about a 2/3 provincial portion and 1/3 local portion. In a system that equalizes assessments around the province, an area like Vancouver with high assessments is always going to get less out of the provincial pot on the basic grant. You can't change that.
He's right about the ESL classes, some being between 60 and 70%. It's a dreadful problem. Do you not help actively with that?
We help very actively in that, and I put an additional $1.5 million this year into that program so that the school districts would not have to be out of pocket for their ESL programs. And we are going to be doing this, I would think, each year to help the school districts with ESL. There are very good ESL programs on the east side of Vancouver.
Would you like to see the immigration of non-English speaking people cut down to ease the burden on your school system?
My attitude towards that is that the decisions are made nationally, and if a national decision is made to bring in 10,000 refugees, then those refugees are going to settle in Canada really where they wish. You can't control the thing internally. And many of them are going to come to Vancouver and to Toronto. If you have housing shortages and job shortages in the area that they're going to come, that has to be addressed when you decide to bring them in. My attitude is that they're here, that they're students who want to learn. They had a hard time getting this far. Their parents had to have a great deal of initiative and courage to come here. So they're going to become Canadian citizens. We want to make them the best educated Canadian citizens that we can. That's what we're doing.
We'll leave midstreaming, as you say, because you say you're trying to do some help on that.
We realize there's misstreaming.
Misstreaming?
Misstreaming, sure.
I'm talking about the handicap.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's under the old Jericho policy and McGee's plan.
But Jericho is going to remain as a central facility for the deaf. And not only is that going to happen, but we're examining ways of some decentralization as well. There's a group home that's already been opened in Vancouver where deaf students are living out of the central facility. So we'll have a mixture of a centralized facility and some decentralization.
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I'm next?
Yes, you are.
Yes, good morning, Jack. Lawrence Crawford, Toronto, with my 17-year-old daughter spending her grade 12 year here in British Columbia. My comments on the statement you made about seniors entering the school system being a frill are, first, Tom Alsbury's got the right idea. Secondly, senior citizens not only have rights, but they can also be volunteer teachers for themselves And thirdly, in Toronto, I've been very active in seeing through the North York Board of Education, seniors come in intergenerational programs. And believe me, the youngsters enjoy it. When seniors contribute in terms of social history.
All I'm saying is that everybody's always screaming and whining and moaning about increased costs. And as far as I know, every program costs money. And I would suspect that the money is far greater, needed in far greater measure for the ESL programs or for the handicap being streamed into the system than for seniors. How do you feel, Mr. Minister?
I can prove to you from the Ontario experience that it doesn't cost that much more money, and I just wish my congratulations to the Honourable Brian Smith, and I'd like to argue it out with you further, but I know we're on the air.
Yeah, and I know that it's a dull subject, and I'm not keen on arguing it out
Dull.
further.
It shouldn't be for you, Jack, and it shouldn't be for me. We're going to be seniors ourselves.
Not me, never. Perpetual teenager. Dumpy, fat one, but nevertheless. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
What are you laughing at, Mr. Minister? You're not supposed to laugh on these programs. Go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, yes. I have a question for Mr. Smith. Unless the school curriculum has changed in the last 5 years, when I went to school, I had to have French to get into university. Now, has that changed?
For UBC now, you must have French.
UBC you must have. The other two you don't. In British Columbia, you don't have to.
Not Victoria?
No, not yet, no.
That's disgraceful. That really is appalling.
My alma mater.
Can you speak French?
No. No,
That's appalling,
Latin,
too.
Latin. It's absolutely appalling. That's one of the reasons why I'm keen for others to speak it.
Why don't you lean on SFU in Victoria and say, get French in as a compulsory subject?
Have you ever tackled senates and boards of governors of universities?
I know how to do it, but nobody would listen to me. Thank you, ma'am. Break. No, not yet. Go ahead, please.
A vital learning process is that of reading. Therefore, why are children being made to guess as to the correct word which goes into...
Ma'am, start that all again.
Can't understand it.
Be a little more crisp, please. Your voice is fading.
Oh. Mr. Smith, a vital learning process is that of reading. Therefore, why are children being made to guess as to the correct word which goes into a sentence, especially when they don't even know what the words mean? Are they going to benefit from this type of teaching? What will happen to these kids as they...
Are you talking about this look and say method or something?
No, I'm just talking about the reading methods which are taught in the school.
Do you know anything about the reading methods, Mr. Smith?
I can't follow quite what she's saying, and maybe if she would be a little more specific.
I can't follow you either, ma'am, and I'm pretty bright.
He's brighter than I am. I can't follow.
Bright?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about.
Why are children being made to guess when a sentence is given to a child and they have a space and there are 3 words that they have to choose from, and they have to guess as to which correct word goes into that sentence? And the child does not guess the correct word. The child does not know the meaning of those 3 words.
Well, perhaps it's the teacher's fault that he doesn't know the meaning of the 3 words.
Child certainly should be taught the meaning of those 3 words.
Of course
and
he should.
Be gone over with him so that he learns that why he chose the wrong word and what the right word means.
Okay. You said that parents want more discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever consider bringing back the strap?
Well, I've had parents who have asked me to do that, but there isn't an outrageous sort of stampede of strappers out there. What there really is instead of that is people who would like to see the classroom teacher and the principal have more direct authority to deal with disciplinary problems without going through endless red tape and delays.
May I give you, if you have not already got it, a copy of an incredible document from Burnaby School Board which makes it impossible to suspend a child, it would seem to me. Have you seen that document?
No, I can believe there are such documents, though, in the province.
Committees after committees after committees, after referrals, after parent participation, after school boards, after teachers. I'll get it out during the break.
Yeah.
And let you have it. One more session with Brian Smith, the Minister of Education, after the break. Well, you were telling me that, did we find that Burnaby thing, by the way? How not to suspend a student? You were telling me that many of these seniors programs are in fact self-supporting.
They can be self-supporting, that's right. They can pay their own way, and on that basis, I think they're they're very
Have
desirable.
you looked closely at all, as our Minister of Education, at the operation of these colleges?
Actually, the first institutions I visited when I was sworn into this portfolio were the colleges, and I visited, I think, all of them in the province but one.
Were you unhappy with them?
No, I wasn't unhappy with them, but I realized that to work out some kind of coordination and planning so they can continue to do their good work with limited funds is a huge challenge.
Are they good colleges?
Yes, they're very good colleges. They're very good colleges in the sense that they meet local community needs pretty well.
Mm-hmm. I just don't have a feeling about them. Don't trust them.
Well,
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith. Howie Meeker has that advertisement on TV to do with kids,
Career planning.
and that.
By videotape, yeah.
Now, they have a chart there that so many students in a school, it costs so much, and that. Why can't the government cough up the money and put this out for the students for the school, for the students? That way then the students wouldn't have to, help with it or whatever they say,
Are you a shareholder in Howie's operation?
Pardon me?
Are you a shareholder in Howie Meeker's operation? No, that doesn't make any sense, that question. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Morning, ma'am.
I would like to ask your speaker what he is doing about bringing French to elementary schools. I firmly believe that while the children are young, this is the time to...
Okay, we've got your question.
Yeah. French immersion programs are the most rapidly expanding new programs in British Columbia. They are done at the elementary level. They are done at kindergarten in grade 1, and they are done at grade 5 and grade 6 primarily. There are over 3,000 students taking those programs. Over 20 school districts have introduced them, and that is exactly the purpose of French immersion. That is to get children familiar in thinking and speaking a second language when they're young and when they're able to do it as second nature.
That's not available for every elementary child, is it?
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. But it's expanding, and there are good programs in Vancouver, good programs in the Lower Mainland, and they're spreading all over the province. What you do is you fight for those programs if you want them.
With your local school board?
With your local school board.
Who have to put up the money?
No, I put up part of the money too, and so does the federal government.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Couple of remarks. First of all, enrichment. It's my feeling that enrichment should begin in the primary grades, not in the intermediate, as I've only known it. My second point is to do with children who attend preschools and then go into kindergarten and are only disappointed that there isn't more formal education. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't be looking at lowering the age to, say, 4.
For entry to the kindergartens?
For kindergarten. My third point is I don't think that it's right that professionals can come into the school and test your child without your knowledge.
Oh!
On it?
One, she doesn't want her children tested by professionals unless the parent approves. Do you think that's a reasonable attitude to have?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Why shouldn't the child be tested by some school board professional?
Well, I assume that she's not talking about straight educational testing. She's talking about non-educational
Oh, are you talking about
psychological
non-educational testing? What are you, ma'am?
No, I'm talking about our child has a speech problem, and the speech therapist came into the school and tested the child and didn't bother to call me and tell me.
Well, I think you have a right to be concerned about that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I'm sorry I misunderstood your question. How about kindergarten grade 4?
No, I think that that would cost so much money overall across the system that it probably is not going to happen for a while. But there is a case, a very strong case, that can be made for severely handicapped children that they should get an earlier start, that the years from 1 to 4 for them are almost like a decade, and that they're not getting anything provincial, and that they should. You can make a very good case for that.
She should drop you a note about that speech therapy testing without her knowledge, to you, shouldn't
Yes, and I would be quite happy to talk to the school board in Richmond about it.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning. I have 2 questions. The first one is about universities. When I was a student myself, I was told that our tuition fees barely covered the cost of our university education. And I'm upset now to find that there are a lot of foreign students attending the universities and they are paying exactly the same rates as I would have paid when I...
Why no extra charge to foreign students occupying spaces in our universities? Why should they get the subsidized rate?
Well, that's a tricky policy decision that government is looking at. But I would remind you that, Jack, that if you start to put special surcharges on foreign students at our universities, that the same thing will happen to our students when they go elsewhere. In fact, it's happening to them now in Britain and other places.
But we have a preponderance. We get far more foreign students than if I was to go down to the States in California, they pay an economic rate. If they go to New York, they pay the economic rate. Why should we be mugs for this area?
Well, I don't think we will be mugs. I'm trying to negotiate now with the British government a reciprocal exchange for a number of Canadian students, a guaranteed number, so that there are no surcharges for, say, 1,000 Canadian students, in return for which we admit 1,000 students for the United Kingdom.
Well, I think that's fair enough. 1,000 between here and Britain, fine enough. But let's not have reciprocal agreements where we have one in a foreign country and they have 10,000 here.
No, that's right.
What is your own personal opinion? Should foreign students be charged an economic fee rate when they're occupying our highly pressed educational systems?
I don't think that we should subsidize foreign students, but I do think that we want to always have a profile of foreign students, and we don't want to close our universities and wall them up and only encourage our own students.
Of course not. Do you happen to have the numbers?
I don't have them. That's under Dr. McGear's portfolio, universities.
Oh, that's McGear's. I should ask McGear about that. I will do it, too, just a matter of interest. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
Two questions. One deals with funding for private schools, separate schools.
Funding for private schools, yes.
I'd like to know if it's ensconced so that if another party got into power, other than the Socreds, could it be just
wiped out?
Wiped out, or...
Okay, your next question.
And if they see any way of boosting the aid they're giving.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just listen to your television. Two questions. Is the independent school funding a firm formula which, of course, can be changed by a successful government?
Absolutely, it could, and quite likely would be changed, because I know that there are a number of opposition members who are opposed philosophically to that proposition, so that it would be risky time for them if there was a change.
Political propaganda.
Well, no, I think that...
Throw out social credit and the NDP will scrap funding for independent schools.
I was asked a specific question and I gave a specific answer.
Fair enough.
I'm firmly committed to that funding. That funding increases as inflation increases. It's 30% of the basic cost of educating a child in the public system that we pay to the independent school, and that increases as the cost of educating that child is increased. A lot of people have told me during my tour that we should be giving more assistance to independent schools. I'm considering that, but my answer to them is, at what stage, when we fund you, do you lose your independence? And I'm most concerned about that. That gives me a lot more concern than the dollars.
Good answer. Where is your next public meeting?
It's in Burnaby tonight, Jack, at 7 o'clock.
Where?
I'll tell you.
Give you a free plug, no charge.
At the School Education Center in Burnaby.
At 7 o'clock tonight?
At 7 o'clock, that's
Phone the
right.
Burnaby School Board if you want to know where it is. My thanks to Brian Smith, Minister of Education and the Government of Victoria. I'll be back with the guy who used to be a publisher and is now a paper boy after the break. Both the old chaps here this morning, J. Stuart Keate and J. Edgar Webster, remember well the days when newspapers were newspapers, when newspapers hammered the field, were in competition, and were the documents of record. They've gone, haven't they, Stuart?
Well, just a moment ago you said you're not going to retire, so I presume that, Jack, you're fighting on, as of yore.
Yeah, but I'm shedding a little tear for the once proud, once independent Vancouver Sun, of which you were the distinguished publisher.
Well, there's very few independents left now. I think there's only one in BC, isn't there? The Columbian in Westminster, and then you get back east, a couple on the prairies and a couple in Halifax.
How do you feel about the mergers of the big boys? The Southams and the Thompsons and even the Bells in earlier days who moved in and took over the Sun.
Well, I was very sorry about what happened this past summer, Jack, because, and particularly in regard to Victoria and Ottawa, the centers of government where you need all the opinion and criticism you can get. Ottawa's down to one paper now. Victoria, they've cut away half the columnists, half the Times, and made a merged paper. And I'm not sure that these are necessary, and I think probably it's one of the things that the Royal Commission will take a look at when they come out here.
But as a practical man and a small p politician, what do you expect from Tom Kent, himself an ex-newspaper man, ex-civil servant, or whatever he is? Do you expect that anything can be undone that has now been done?
A strange thing, Jack, nobody that I know of has picked up yet on Kent's intriguing background and his equipment for this job, because you may remember he was a very graceful editorialist of The Economist. And Victor Sifton went over and met him and liked his style and brought him back as editor of the Free Press in Winnipeg. He lasted there 5 years. They had a terrible fight, and he left. Well, then he turned up as Mike Pearson's executive assistant. And there was a thing you may remember called the Kingston Conference of Liberals, which reshaped the policy of the party. And what did Tom Kent propose? Do you remember?
No.
A tax on advertising of all newspapers in Canada. So I think with this as background.
And then, of course, later on, he came out as a carpetbagger to fight against Tommy Douglas.
That's right.
And lost in Burnaby.
Yeah. Well, I think probably Kent will be open-minded. He's a highly intelligent fellow, but I would say also that he would be skeptical of some of the arrangements that have been made.
Can you show me the cover of that book again, Maureen? Can you put the cover of the book up? Or can you? Yeah. That little paper boy on the front cover has your name underneath you, Stuart. Is that you?
Not quite. That's some Ontarian from their archives.
Now, you see, you misled me. I thought that was your picture as a small boy in Victoria selling papers.
Well, how much do you suppose that kid would get for selling papers in those days, Jack? The paper sold for a cent, didn't it, or something? And
he'd get 25 cents a week.
25 cents a week, eh?
Yeah.
And today he gets, I think, well, when I left the Sun, he was getting $1.35 a copy.
But didn't you ever blush when you were doing promotion on the Vancouver Sun and you went through all this stuff about from paper boy to publisher?
That's where the title came from. When I was elected president of the Canadian Press in Toronto, the Telegram sent a fellow around to the room to do a little story, and the next day they had this Horatio Alger headline on it, from paper boy to publisher, which kind of embarrassed me. I think it's...
so you're basically a modest fellow.
I think so, yeah.
You describe one of your columnists...
I have much to be modest about.
You describe one of your former columnists, Mr. Fotheringham...
Oh, yes.
...as a man who was very pleasant socially, but when he sat down at his typewriter, he produced pure bile.
Well, it's a strange metamorphosis. I think you know this is true, Jack. You know Foth as well as I do, and know what a charming fellow he is off parade.
No comment.
But when he sits down behind that typewriter, steam emits from his ears and bile from his heart.
Ah, good. I wondered what body orifice you were going to mention. But you, sir, J. Stuart Keate, are also, much to my surprise, because I've known you many years, capable of pure bile.
You think so?
Yes.
I'm astonished.
Your descriptions of your boss, R.S. Malone, who is still alive, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Are pure bile.
Well, Jack, I don't think so. I had a story to tell, and I wanted to tell it as straight as I possibly could, and it had to do with the rise, the flaring, and the falling of FP Publications Limited. You remember, in 1958, Max Bell had 4 papers, the Albertan, the Lethbridge Herald, the 2 Victorias. Sifton had the Free Press. They went together to form FP, and the purpose of it was defined as to provide a strong voice from the West in Ottawa. They acquired the Ottawa Journal. In rapid succession after that, the Vancouver Sun, 63, the Globe and Mail, and the Montreal Star. Now this, inside of 12 years, made FP the largest and most influential group of newspapers in Canada. Well then, 8 years later, it's dead, gone, forgotten, obliterated. And why? First of all, there was the strike in Montreal. It closed that down. That was a rum show. And that got the takeover boys interested. And they came down to 2, Ken Thompson and Howard Webster of Montreal, but chairman of the Toronto Globe and Mail. Now, what was the position of Mr. Malone in all this? After the Siftons died, he voted the Winnipeg shares. After Max Bell died, he voted the Calgary shares. He held 7.5% of the shares in the middle to... in case of dispute, he could jump either way. He had been publisher of the Free Press for 10 years and of the Globe Mail for about 8 years. But when it came down to the voting and the bidding at the end, What did he do? He told the shareholders to vote for Thompson's, whom he knew to be penurious, parsimonious, and operated in much the same way as he did. Now, that's a matter of historical record, Jack, and I think it's Canadiana that would have been lost had it not been recorded, so I recorded it.
And you tell it well.
Well, thank you.
And then after that, of course, after the Thompson buyout came the Southern move.
Yes.
Was that just as tragic?
Well, in Winnipeg, I don't fault them, Jack, because as you know, they spent $17 million there trying to overtake the Free Press. A good, honest effort, and I think a good paper, the Tribune. I blame the citizens of Winnipeg. They obviously didn't want two newspapers. They had two good ones. Now they've got one.
An unfair question, but must be made. What will now be the net effect, however, of the Southern control of the two big papers in the Pacific Press plant in Vancouver? The net effect on newspapers.
I have no inside information, Jack, but my guess would be there'll be a kind of a hiatus until Tom Kent and his boys do their work. That I would think it'd be rather reckless to make major moves at this time.
Would you be surprised to know that I've got the Union Vancouver Newspaper Guild Local 115 bulletin, and already plans to merge two departments of the Sun and the Province were discussed at a recent meeting of Union and Company representatives to amalgamate the advertising and circulation departments. Is that bad or good?
Well, I think it's inevitable. That's what they have in Victoria right from the start, you know, a common circulation department and common advertising. I don't know why they didn't do that originally when they set up Pacific Press in 1958. I think that will come and perhaps it'll be more efficient. It may cost some jobs.
You used the description of Thompson as penurious and what?
Parsimonious.
Parsimonious and penurious.
Yes.
But Malone, with your experiences with him, and we'll hear about that after the break, was just as penurious, in fact, if perhaps more so, and parsimonious. In Stu Keate's stories in his book, Paperboy, after the break. One of the key characters in Stuart Keate's book, Paperboy, is R.S. Malone, who ran the Bell operation for many years, correct?
Right.
Penurious and parsimonious. Give us a laugh about his penurious parsimony.
Well, there are a number of examples in the book, Jack, but one that always amused me had to do with some modest raises I was proposing. We started out in tough times in Victoria and gradually evolved with the winter, and time had come to make some raises for non-contract people, ranging from $2.50 to $15, I think it was. And I had a list on my desk, and Dick came in and he said, "What's this?" And I told him, and so he went down the list and went through each one. When he came to the $2.50 one, he stroked it out and put $1.75. And this was for somebody he, of course, didn't know.
$2.50 a week of a raise.
Yeah.
You were being big.
Yeah.
And he got it back to
$1.75.
$1.06 bits.
I hasten to say that I restored it.
Because as publisher, did you have total and absolute freedom as publisher, even under Malone?
No. No, there were examples, and I've cited several of attempted interference in, for instance, the size of cuts and the objection to the picture of the New York kids being married on top of Garibaldi Mountain.
I know. We're now talking a form of content.
Yeah.
Political interference, did you ever suffer from that at any time?
No. Max Bell was really our mentor and all that, and he was very good. In 22 years I was with him, he asked me once to take a look at the subject that interested him, and that was an encyclical by Pope John the 23rd, which he thought was really special and we ought to say something about.
But I do remember you carrying some horrendously dull pieces by R.S. Malone on NATO or Europe or foreign policy.
Well, he's a global thinker, you know, he likes to write. And
would Malone say, run that?
No.
You chose to run them?
Yes.
They were dull.
Yes.
Will I push you any further? No, I won't push you any further on that one because I know exactly what the situation might well have been. Now, there's a great story in it. Oh, first of all, Pearson was a great friend of yours.
Yes.
Have you a favorite story about Lester B. Pearson?
Well, there's many, but I like particularly the one when I challenged him on his knowledge of baseball, which is in the book, incidentally. I just started by saying to him, Mr. Prime Minister, are you aware that one of your constituents struck out Joe DiMaggio more than any other pitcher in the big leagues? And he just took off for about 10 minutes and told me the whole life history of The pitcher in question was a boy named Phil Marshaldon from Penatangwisheen, as the Prime Minister said. You know?
So his knowledge was encyclical.
Encyclopedic, yeah.
Encyclopedia, I'm sorry.
Right.
There was a papal encyclical
Yeah.
we were talking about early on.
Yeah.
Now, there is a piece of war history in here, which I find, as a member of the British Army at one time, impossible to believe.
Yes.
Were you on the cruise of Uganda?
Yes.
Is it correct, answer the question yes or no, please witness, that the crew of the Uganda voted themselves out of the war?
Yes.
Give.
Well, you may remember at the end of the war in Europe, Mackenzie King was advised that Canada would be required to post only a token force in the Pacific because the war was winding down there. An Army brigade of 25,000 men under Rocky, I think, and an Air Force wing, and then maybe a few ships. And this had to be done, it was stressed, on a volunteer basis. So one day, after we'd been out there 8 or 9 months with the British Pacific Fleet, we got a signal from Ottawa saying, do you volunteer for service in the Pacific? And our fellows, as I say, had been out there with the fleet for about a year. They were living on dehydrated potatoes and Spam and were getting a little brassed off with it. Anyway, the captain said, we've got to take a vote on this. It's a political thing. It stems from Ottawa. So we rigged ballot boxes on the stern of the ship, and the vote was 603 to go home and 300 to stay. So on a certain date, about 2 weeks after that vote was taken, we turned around and headed for home. And on the way home, the first atom bomb was dropped on Japan. And interestingly enough, Jack, as I look back on it, we didn't realize how significant that was. We just knew that some devastating weapon had come up. We landed in Victoria the day Tojo quit. The war was over. We went on leave and got demobbed.
But the Uganda's crew did vote themselves out of the war in line with the political policy of Mackenzie King.
That's right.
And I suppose it was a logical thing to be done in the context of the Canadian political climate.
Well, actually, Jack, the captain asked me to do a survey, which he thought might be helpful, on where the boys in the ship had served up until that time. And it turned out that about 75% of them had done 3 or 4 years on the North Atlantic. And that was, they'd paid their dues.
I'm not complaining. If I'd been given a chance to vote myself out of the war at any time, I would certainly have voted out, not in.
If you voted yourself out, if you were a non-volunteer, what it meant was you'd come back to Esquimalt, the ship would recommission and get a new crew and come back out again. That was the plan. And then, of course, when Tojo quit, that was the end of the war.
The war ended that.
Yeah.
Question. Newspapers have been noted in Canada for not paying enough money to attract the right people.
Yeah.
Do you plead guilty to having been a publisher like that who would not pay enough money?
Well, I always did my best, Jack, to get the best budget I could. And when I was at the Sun, it went from, let me see, $1.5 million to slightly in excess of $6 million for the newsroom.
For the editorial.
Yeah, and I think that this has all changed. I think people in the business today are comparatively well paid. It's not uncommon for reporters across Canada, senior reporters across Canada, to be paid $30,000 a year or more, and then they have overtime and a lot freelance, you know.
If would you recommend to a bright, talented young man of ubiquitous knowledge and ambition to start at the bottom, as you did in newspapers?
Yes. Yeah.
You would?
Sure.
But how can they survive against the onslaught of television, facsimile, satellite newscasts which we're going to get from all over the world?
Well,
how can newspapers survive?
I can tell you how they survive. There's a municipal election here on Saturday, and you couldn't find out from any radio or television station that I know of what went on, except Channel 10, the public station, was covering it. You pick up the Sun tonight and you'll find right down to the last vote how every contestant fared. In other words, what I'm saying, Jack, it performs a different function than the other. They're complementary
functions. The newspaper of record is still a newspaper of record,
exactly,
is it not?
Yeah.
Stuart, I'll leave you at that. I'm just trying to think if I've missed anything, because somebody will say Webster interviewed Keate. They didn't ask him this and they didn't ask him that. Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm content to get a draw, so why don't we...
Just a minute. Why is there not a woman newspaper publisher in this country today? Is that sexism among the old boy network?
Well, oddly enough, Jack, there was one pointing that way. I think in Winnipeg at the Tribune, a girl, Donna Harvey, I think her name was the editor. And of course, we had an editor in the Victoria Times, the
Barbara
McClintock girl. Publisher, you're looking for Mrs. Pinchon with her purple their poodle dog under their arm?
No, you mean from the television series?
Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering,
Right.
really, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying this because I fled from newspapers from '53.
Yeah.
I'm merely saying that I'd be hard-pressed to recommend that a young guy looking for advancement should go work in under the union conditions in a 7.5-hour shift in a newspaper today.
Well, it's interesting, Jack. I've seen some what I regard as great reporters go into television and get lost because they didn't have the presence, shall we say. They weren't performers, but they were simply great in newspapers. And I think probably the converse is true.
As a matter of fact, I don't plan to sue you for what you say about me in the book.
Well, as a matter of fact, I wanted an adjective to describe your programming, and the first one I used was boorish. And then I said, well, I can't say that about my old friend, the oatmeal savage. So I came down to, I think it was either belligerent, bellicose, or bodacious.
No, that's not what you used.
What did I use?
Blusterer.
Blustering. Well,
Blustering.
I have heard you hang up your phone or slam down your phone on nice little old ladies, and I don't know how you do it.
But I'm, sir, purely an editor on my public duty. And to keep my copy tight so that people will not switch off in droves, I must take away all the meanderings, if I possibly can.
Well, I remember a famous case, and I think you remember it too. When you were on NW Radio, you were interviewing Phil Ghilardi one day when he was in the veil of all his problems, and he got going, and you said to him, I'll never forget, now really, Mr. Ghilardi, I must stop you. And he was then a cabinet minister, and he stopped. And I think you remained good friends, didn't you?
Oh, yes. I have managed to get through life as you have without making more than 2 or 3 deadly enemies. One of yours we know.
Yeah.
No, is Malone a deadly enemy? He's still alive.
Oh, no. He's alive, very much alive, yeah.
Has he told you what he thinks of the book?
No, not yet.
Will he?
Well, I'm going east to do the circuit in Toronto and Ottawa and Montreal next week, so that's possible. And incidentally, I was asked to mention to you, Jack, that I'm going to sign books today at Duthie's.
Do you know what we call
it? At Eaton's.
We call this a brass check.
Yes, of course.
We will now give Stuart Keate a brass check. The brass check is that he's signing book at Duthie's, books at Duthie's. What time today?
12:30.
And what time at Eaton's?
12:30.
2 places at once?
Eaton's is tomorrow.
Oh, Eaton's is tomorrow. Yeah. My thanks to the paper boy, an old friend, J. Stuart Keate, affectionately called Big Stewie.
Thank you, Jack.
After the break. Meant to leave more time for the phones this morning to have a little inquest on the civic election. Certainly the election of Harcourt and all the people from Cope will make the place worth covering. Shouldn't really admit that in public, but that happens to be the truth. There should be a little bit of lightness, brightness, and a lot of boring nonsense, but it's going to have to be covered properly, the City Council, including yours truly, this coming year. Steve, peripatetic, has been out doing a piece on saving a church in the North Shore. Here is Steve Wyatt.
Jack, in 4 years, St. Paul's Church here in North Vancouver will celebrate its 100th birthday. But for the past few years, the church has been decaying, and the people who attend services here are trying to restore it. It's important for people like Simon Baker. He's 70 years old, and he was baptized at St. Paul's.
On Sundays, this was a gathering place here after the service. The elders or the older people used to sit out on the front. They used to have big steps, and everybody would gather, just like a picnic. Everybody enjoyed themselves, the community, the communications. It was really something to see all the families getting together.
Those were the days when at high tide you could bring your boat right to the doorstep of St. Paul's. In fact, in 1886, its distinctive spire made the church an official navigational landmark. The ornate interior reflected the fervor with which the Oblate missionaries brought discipline to the Squamish Indians, notorious for their unruly reputation. The second spire was added around 1910. The church was growing in size and influence.
We used to have our own police. We used to call them the Catholic police. They were called chiefs after. That used to keep our reserve under control. If anybody was caught doing anything wrong, they had to kneel in front of the church for hours. And everybody would come and watch them. They were punished, you know, and that was quite a severe punishment them days, because you have the old people coming to see you, and they'll say, well, what did you do?
That kind of discipline faded with the physical deterioration of St. Paul's. Then a few years ago, the Heritage Advisory Committee of North Vancouver declared the church the most significant heritage structure on the North Shore. The price tag for restoring St. Paul's to its former self is set at $500,000. The 100-year-old cedar planks are rotting, and the Italian stained glass is in need of sensitive repairs. Inside, the fixtures have already been removed. Before they return, they must be rebuilt. An architect is designing the interior on the basis of old photographs. All that to restore a British Columbia monument and resurrect a piece of Squamish Indian history.
We're not building this church restoration just for tourist attraction. We want it also to be used by our people. Because I believe in any faith. If you don't believe in what you intend to do, well, there's not much use you trying to carry on, because it is a blessing. Even though myself, I don't belong to this religion, but I was baptized, and my father and my grandfather and grandmother were responsible for building this church in the old days.
The rebirth of St. Paul's is already underway, but the hardest job remains unfinished. The Restoration Committee still needs more money. On Tuesday night, the Committee for the Restoration of St. Paul's Church is holding a gala fundraising dinner. In the last 3 years, that committee has raised $250,000, but they need that much again to finish the job. And the 800-strong congregation at St. Paul's would like to have their next service here by Easter. Jack, anyone who's interested in contributing to the fund can write to that address, or if they're interested in going to that dinner tomorrow night, they can telephone that number on the bottom of your screen.
Okay, 669. Lost it off the screen. I've just got time to do something I don't normally do. I want to give a tip of the Webster hat to Alan Fotheringham. Last week he spoke on a panel at the Canadian Institute for the Administration of Justice in the public view of the trial process. And he took the opportunity to tell some of the top legal officials and judges in British Columbia precisely what he thought, which happens to reflect precisely what I think about the fact that in 4 cases involving some forms of misconduct alleged or real by judges last year, no one seemed to have done anything. I congratulate Fotheringham for bearding the lions in their den, and he may have shaken them up a little bit, which they certainly need to be. I shall be back after the break. Fifteen seconds.
Bud McDonald from the Independent Petroleum Association of Canada, talking about energy.
Crying disaster for Canadian exploration companies, no doubt. Also, I have an accolade tomorrow morning. And the Siege of Telqua. Don't miss the Siege of Telqua. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely.